So welcome. We'll talk about a few different issues today. The first one would be a little bit of a background about who I am, what I do, and what's been my journey from an Indian IT male to where I am today. We'll talk about some of the reasons as to why people do an MBA, both what the actual reasons are and what we should be talking about and what we should be thinking about. Then we'll try and bust some of the myths around an MBA program. So there are quite a few different discussion points and views and opinions that you'll come across through this journey. If you haven't already done so, I'll try and break some of those myths and maybe support some of them as well. And then the other thing I'll talk about is what does coronavirus and COVID-19, what does that mean for your MBA application? So, should you be worried? Is this an opportunity for you or not? As we go through the process, as Shujoy mentioned, please feel free to send in your questions. If you want to remain anonymous, you can send in a question either to Shujoy or myself. We aim to finish this off within an hour. We've already been like 12, 13 minutes behind schedule. So I'll try and pick up the pace a bit, but ultimately 45 minutes roughly of me talking and then 10, 15 minutes of questions that you have. This is an open forum. As you guys have seen, you're not being charged anything for this. So feel free to put down any questions. At the end of this session, we'll also talk about what's coming up next and what some of those big ticket items are that we'll be covering off through the course of the next 3 to 4 months. So once every 3 weeks, a webinar like this, we want to make it as customized as possible. So the more feedback, more questions we get, the easier it is for us to build a session around that. No question is a silly question. If you send in a question to myself or Shujoy, when we read out the question, we will not say who the question is from. So this is entirely a very safe environment to be working on. All right. So with that, a little bit of a background about myself. I have an engineering degree, which I graduated in 2002. And then I did a master's of engineering degree. After that, I studied during the master's degree, obviously I studied on electronics, telecommunications, and I was a chip designer by profession. So I worked on multiple large sort of US-centric organizations developing chips on various aspects of chips. There came a point in time when I looked around and I couldn't really find anyone that I wanted to become over the next 5 to 10 years. And that was like a watershed moment for me. That was a moment where I looked at and said, oh, hang on, I don't really want to be like any of them. And you only live once, so I wanted to broaden my spectrum and my horizon. And what do you do when you get to that quandary? You do an MBA, and that's what I did. So I applied for my GMAT, and I got a 760 on my GMAT. So you can understand this is like pretty old. I mean, I sat for my GMAT in 2009. I got 760, so that's about 11 years back. And then I had a decision to make. And this is really important that you understand the journey that I'm going through, because I'll be referring back to this through this and other subsequent webinars. The choice that I had was, with a 760 score, you can pretty much get admission into any business school you want. Obviously, the higher the business school, the more highly ranked a business school, the harder it is for you to get a scholarship. So it was a question of balancing, do I want to go to the US and study in a top 20 school, or am I happy sacrificing a bit and coming to Australia and study from a top 50 school? And I didn't really know any better. So I had to take a punt. I almost took a guess. But the decision-making process at that point was, what am I going to do after an MBA? After an MBA, you typically have quite a few common career pathways. We will be covering some of them in subsequent sessions, so I'll not get into that level of detail now. But it was really interesting because on one hand, I had, yes, you can do the traditional way. You can go into the US, you can do an MBA, and you'll probably get selected by a company and then work. But I didn't really want to get to a position where my decision to stay in a country would be relying upon external factors. which I can't control, right? So a work permit or a green card, whichever way you look at it, it takes about 12, 15 years for you to get that. So I didn't really want to be in that position. So I decided to come to Australia. It was easier to get a permanent residence. I looked at the organizations that recruited from an MBA, and they were all pretty similar to the US ones. So I didn't really see any difference. And so I came here, did my MBA. After an MBA, just like everybody else, you kind of wondering what you want to do. I did a bit of strategy consulting work. I did a bit of product management work. I worked for an investment bank, and then got into HR consulting about 6 years back. And I have been working with many different HR consulting and corporate organizations ever since. So the reason why I wanted to outline my journey so far and my background is almost to explain to you how much ease I have when I work with candidates across the country. I've been there as an Indian IT male. I've done an MBA. I've gone through the process of shortlisting colleges, writing application essays. I've been doing and helping students write application essays for the last 20 years, as I said. It'll probably be a little less, maybe 17 or 18, but it's between 15 and 20 years. And then after an MBA, I've actually done the kind of work that you would all be probably doing at one stage, whether that's in consulting or that's in investment banking. I also have a couple of own startups that I work with at different varying degrees of involvement. So there's a couple that I'm a silent director. There's a couple that I'm a founder in all of them. There's like 4 or 5 different entrepreneurial ventures I'm associated with. I also sit on the board of a couple of not-for-profits here. So, it's really easy for me to understand what students want and understand the journey that you need to take. One of the things Shuja touched upon is a really important thing, and that is when you're working through your MBA applications, the critical thing for you to understand is what is it that you want to do and how crystal clear are you in understanding that. Now, if you haven't really worked in that and if you haven't really dealt with people who are working in that profession, it becomes really hard to actually articulate what's management consulting, how is it different from strategy consulting, what's product management, what is project management, what is technology consulting, is technology consulting the same thing as writing programs, or is there something else? What kind of projects do you get? What is your normal work? What does an entrepreneur need to do? Why is it important for an entrepreneur to do an MBA or to have an MBA? So all of these things become really easy for me because I've actually gone in and done that. So that's a little bit of myself, of my background. The first thing I wanted to explore today was understanding of why people wanted to do an MBA. Before I go in there, I'll pause at the end of every section just to see if there's anything anyone wants any clarification on, including sending me private messages or through this call. So does anyone have any question or anything about my background that they wanted me to elaborate? No. Okay, perfect. So I'll just keep going and I'll stop at the end of the next session again. So this section, I wanted to talk about why do people do an MBA? And as I said at the beginning of this session, there's two ways of looking at it. One is, why do people actually do an MBA? Like, what's the underlying reason for them to do an MBA? And the second one is, well, you can't really tell your underlying reason or explain your underlying reason to an admissions committee, right? So how do you place yourself? Like, how do you position yourself? So I'll just do a quick poll around here. And I'll talk about some of the main reasons why people think about doing an MBA, because it's important to understand why I'm getting to that. So the first reason that people want to do an MBA is to be able to reset their career, right? So they started off as an engineer, most typical example. Engineering, you complete your engineering degree, then you get into an IT job and you work in IT for 3 years, 4 years, and then you suddenly realize, hang on, this is not really what I signed up for. This is not very exciting. This is not what's going to give me the pleasure or the happiness or whatever it is I'm looking for in life. And therefore, I think I need to do an MBA to be able to move away from IT. That's one main reason. The second reason is because people actually want to live abroad, and an MBA is often the easiest way for them to go wherever, US, Canada, UK, Australia, Singapore, wherever it is. An MBA is a good opportunity for them to go there, complete the MBA, and stay there. The other reason is no progression at work. So basically, you're kind of stuck in a rut. You like what you do, but you're just doing the same thing repetitively over and over again. And then you think, well, what about going to another company? And then you find out, oh, hang on, it's actually going to be the same. So it might be interesting early on, but then after the first 3-4 months, everybody's doing the same thing. And you get really bored with that, and you think that's not who I am. Money is another reason why people do it. They think that an MBA is a good way for them to make good money. And in some respects, that's true, but not always. Fast track career. So, you want to stay in the same industry. You don't want to move industries, but you're kind of at that sort of entry level middle manager, and you want to move into senior management or executive positions pretty quickly. An MBA will probably allow you to fast track your career by 3 years. So if something would have taken you normally 5 years, with an MBA, you can do it in 2 years. So by 2 years, I mean 1.5 years of an MBA, and then another 6 months to a year of working. So that shaves off about 2.5 years from your normal career progression. The final reason why people do an MBA is to realize that they have a very specific long-term or a short-term goal. And that could be, again, looking at an example of an Indian IT person, you want to start up something of your own. You don't really know how to get there. A lot of people actually start up something, and then very soon they realize that, I don't have enough knowledge. I don't have enough skills. People are not taking me seriously. I'm struggling to get funding. And therefore I need to go and do an MBA. What I wanted to cover off at this point was just a basic quick poll to see, is there any other reason why any one of you might want to do an MBA? No. So I'm just going to take that as an affirmation of the reasons that I've explained for why you need to do an MBA. It's a really important thing to understand and realize, because the first question that you would be asked, whether that's through your application process or in your interview or in your discussions with professors, alumni, is why do you want to do an MBA? And the 7 or 8 reasons that I've explained are probably the only reasons why people want to do an MBA. I mean, I'll ask this question many times to many students just to see if there was anything else. I haven't heard back anything else. So I'm assuming it's one of these 7 reasons. Sometimes it could be a combination. So it could be 1 and 2 or 1 and 4. But at the end of the day, that's your sample size, right? So now that you know that these are those 7 or 8 reasons, this is where you slowly start strategizing for your career. So what that means is, you slowly start putting in time behind developing your application that helps you articulate one of these 7 reasons by personalizing it. So something like, I've got a long-term goal of starting up my business, but how do I actually do that? So that's the reason why you want to do an MBA. Now what you've got to do is work towards what is it the business does, what specific problem is it trying to solve? How are you actually planning to solve this? How big a value would this add? All those sort of, different questions and different examples that you probably need to work through. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk or cover up was why people do an MBA. Was there any specific thing that you wanted me to talk about reasons for an MBA? I've dealt with so many students that I probably have heard all the background questions. If not, we'll move on to the next part, but I just wanted to pause for a second. No? All right. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was how do you actually decide on where to do an MBA? So this is a really important question because, and this kind of links into the next thing I'll talk about, which is busting some of the myths around an MBA program. It is quite important to understand that the reasons for you to do an MBA, which is what we just spoke about, has to be satisfied by your MBA program for obvious reasons. I mean, if you want to do an MBA, which is good for entrepreneurship, then you need to pick an MBA program that actually supports or has a lot of entrepreneurs coming out of the program. So I have a few of the students here in this session, and what I wanted to do was basically discuss. So I talk about this all the time. I'll give you some of the pointers or some of the top level things that you should be considering or should be thinking about when you look at which MBA program to select. I would start with the country. That's a really important thing. And in my experience, it always works out well. A lot of people do not start with the country. They go straight to the Financial Times rankings. My recommendation is please don't do that, because at the end of the day, there are very limited differences between most MBA programs. I've also not met too many people who are very sort of, very focused about what they want to do, and that's all they'll do. You might have a dream, you might have a goal at the beginning of your MBA program, but trust me, more often than not, that goal gets written off, or you update or upgrade on that goal as you're going through your MBA program. And that's the way it is. That's the benefit of an MBA program. It's meant to change. Your goal is meant to change. So if you thought that you wanted to do an entrepreneurial venture and then you get into a program that is too focused on entrepreneurship, throughout the journey of the MBA, you'll see that there are certain things that come up which you hadn't thought of because you hadn't done an MBA. So you didn't know or realize or consider. When you go through the program, you'll suddenly think, oh, hang on, this is actually not the best thing for me to do for certain things, for certain reasons. I'm not well prepared. I don't know what I'm solving for. I don't have funding. I need to put food on the table, whatever that is. Or the fact that, you hadn't thought about management consulting as a career, but then you see what your friends are doing and you go, oh, wow, that's really exciting. I actually want to be part of that. So don't get too fixated on the rankings up front. First, work out which country you want to go and work in. A very common question that I get asked is, what's the difference between US and non-US? And what's the difference between India and the rest of the world? So as in, what factors should I consider when I'm picking up a US school, and what factors should I consider when I'm picking up an Indian school? Now, the answer to that generally depends on a case-by-case basis. For obvious reasons, Indian MBAs are cheaper to do. They are quicker to do. They're also quite highly linked to career opportunities. So if you think about an ISB program, you get in, and from the first day, you're thinking about what job can you get and how can you move towards that path. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just something that is very much oriented on your career. A US MBA, on the other hand, is a more traditional 2-year MBA, which allows you to go in, get your feet under the desk, settle down, look at what's happening elsewhere, find out from others, maybe potentially change your goals or change the goal post, at least through discussions with professors, other alumni, friends, your cohort. The US MBA program is probably the easiest to predict, almost, the rate of success and failure. It's very methodical, it's very structured. So, your GMAT score is very important, your work experience is really important, your essays are kind of important, your leadership skills are important. And then after an MBA, you generally end up in management consulting or in an in-house corporate role, or in investment banking if you're working, if you're studying out of New York, or even California on the other coast. So but it's not for everyone, right? I mean, not everyone wants to spend 2 years on an MBA program. There's more scholarship in the US, but at the same time, that might not be a very big concern for you. You might actually want to go in and get your MBA program and move out quicker. If that's the case, then countries like Europe, well, continents like Europe, as a matter of fact, Australia, maybe Hong Kong, these are better places. These are more focused on developing you into getting you ready for the next job. But it's not, the colleges are not really focused on getting you a job. The colleges are focused on getting you ready for the job. So there's a difference. And that's why picking up a country almost is a very important factor. Within Australia, I've lived in Sydney, Melbourne, and now Brisbane. We were in Melbourne for a year and the cold got to us and we didn't really like the cold and we left Melbourne because of that. You don't really think about it now, but if you think about doing an MBA from a place which is really, really cold, that means literally two years of your life you're devoting to a place where 2 months of a year is going to be under the snow. That might not sound again as a very big thing, but trust me, it's really a big hazard when you have to get out of your house and you need to go to the uni, but you know, your car's not starting or the bus is cancelled or you've got to walk through massive amounts of snow or rain or whatever that is. So your country is very important. Your weather is really important. These are things that people don't think about. But in my view, a practical way of looking at it is to start with your country, is to start with your weather. Understanding the local job market, again, very important. Whether you're going in there to study and complete your MBA and come back to India, or you want to just continue working there, is a big decision factor. Obviously, with what's happening in the world right now, there are very few places where you can actually go in and stay there or live there after your MBA, but there's still opportunities there. That should play a significant part. You've got to remember that wherever you do an MBA from, at the end of the day, that's where you'll have to get a job. It's really hard for you to do an MBA in the US unless you're doing it from Stanford and Harvard, and then to go to London and get a job. It doesn't happen like that. You do an MBA in the US, you have to work in the US. Generally speaking, 80% of the time, pretty much in the same state where you've done the MBA. So it's really important for you to know what that state looks like, how many Indians are there, what's the crime rate, what's the weather like, because you're probably going to be staying there for 5 years or 6 years. You don't hear people talking about that because they kind of get used to it, but this is a time when you can actually do your research. So rankings will come later, and I'll touch upon the rankings a little later in this session, but start with the country, local job market, whether it's work permit versus residency. What's the return on your investment? So you're investing a certain amount of money. What sort of salary can you expect after an MBA? Always remembering that wherever you work, you'll be getting paid in that local salary. So if you're working in Midwest in the US versus you're working in New York versus you're working in California versus you're working in Boston, they all have local geography, local geographical premiums that they pay based on which city you are working in. A lot of the MBA programs are kind of, it's the same amount of money. So you'll be paying the same amount of money, but the salaries could be as much as 20 to 30% different. So if that's the case, might as well also think about that when you're considering your return on investment. Scholarship is almost very important for most Indian applicants. So where do we get more scholarship from? And more importantly, what's the quantum of the scholarship, right? So a school might give out scholarship to 40% of the students, which is a good number, but what's the average? If the average is like 10 grand, that's not even going to cover, 1 month's rent, for example. So you go, well, that's not really going to help me. And after you've done all of that, that's when you look at school ranking. So you'll see that there are certain obvious things I've left out from here, like your specialization, like what does the school focus on, like the alumni network, like job opportunities. I've left all of these out. As we work through these webinars, you'll see why I'm doing so. And because everything you'll hear me say is a very practical way of thinking. This is what students will actually be thinking. And this is what you would be thinking when you come onto the other side and you start doing your MBA. Everything else that you'll get, or a lot of the things that you'll get out there, which are materials by a lot of other admissions consultants, they talk about things like specialization. Trust me when I say this, and I've been doing this for a long time. I've had students pretty much in any school that you can think of. I haven't got a student in Stanford and Harvard, but London Business School, Kellogg, Carnegie Mellon, Wharton, everywhere. I've got students there. If you think, if you trust me when I say this, I've spoken to each one of them, and before an MBA and after an MBA, just to find out how the journey has been. Every one of my students I've spoken to or I speak to throughout the process. What you'll see as a common factor that comes out is almost all schools are quite similar. They might have a few good professors, but what you learn in school is not really what you're going to be using. You need to learn very basic stuff, and everything else you kind of have to pick up on the job. An MBA is not like it's not a trade. So if people ask you what's your trade, like when people ask me what's my trade, I'll say I'm an engineer. Although I've been in this post-engineering field of an MBA and after MBA work for about 12 years now. For about 10 years now. So 10, 11 years I've not been in engineering, but that's my fundamental trade. Whereas an MBA is almost like a certification. It doesn't give you enough for you to go out and be a practitioner or a professional in that field. You won't hear someone say that I'm a professional business person unless you have your own company. So an MBA, almost all schools are very similar. Professors are very similar. Course materials are similar. Some of them have a little bit of case studies. Some of them have more collaboration, discussion. What really differentiates what you can get out of a school is almost the ranking that it has and the companies that are around it. So, if you pick up a school that you want to go in and study, for example, HKUST, right? Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I know at least 5 people out there, and you'll be surprised to know that they do not have a career recruitment team. So there is no recruitment that happens at a highly ranked school like HKUST. What happens is they have career weeks, and that's when companies come in and present, but there's no formal job offer that's made. A really big difference between what you've heard in India and to some extent in America. The benefit with America is that most of these MBA programs are run out of a bigger university, and you have recruitment, and they just tie it up with the recruitment for the broader population. So you have Google coming on campus, and Google goes into recruit engineers, businessmen, product managers, sales and marketing, and off they go. So that's how it works. And that's the reason why you have campus recruitment in the US. But apart from the US and India, campus recruitment is really not that common. Most people get a job after an MBA, that's not the point, but the way in which they get it is through their own networks, is through their going out and talking to people. So if you're really introverted and you expect the phone to ring like it does in India after you complete your MBA, that's not going to happen outside. So that's a very big distinction that you almost need to do in your mind. All right. Any specific questions at this point before we go on to our myth busting exercise? No? All right. Okay, so let's talk about a few myths. Like, obviously, it's not possible to cover all the myths about an MBA program in one session, particularly if it's just about an hour or an hour 15 minutes. So I'll try and cover some of them. If you've worked with me before, you've heard some of them come up, and we'll aim to uncover some of these as we go through the other webinars as well. So the first one is GMAT is really important, or probably the most important. Yes, it is. Absolutely it is. If there's someone who tells you the GMAT score is not that important, I have been in this field for a long time. I would not agree with that at all. There's a few reasons why. At the end of the day, when a school selects a candidate, they have to select the candidate based on some kind of a metric, right? The essays and the leadership and all that sort of community service, they are really helpful, and they provide what we call qualitative measures. The quantifiable measures are extremely important because the quantifiable measures allow them to measure different students on using one common platform. So if I give you a simple example, working 3 years in a bank and working 2 years or working 4 years in IT, which one is more complex? Well, you don't know, right? It kind of depends. Particularly if it's a bank that no one has heard of, or if it's a bank very specialized to a particular country, like a bank in Spain versus IT in Colombia. How on earth are you going to compare them? You can't, right? So as an admissions committee, they don't know. They kind of go, oh, both of them are working in kind of finance, engineering, technical. So they're kind of good with numbers. That's all they can assume, right? But the thing that really helps put everyone on a common platform are things like your GMAT score. Everyone's taking the GMAT score. It's a standardized score. If somebody gets a 720 and somebody gets a 700, then you can safely say that on the day, the person who got the 720 had a better performance. And over time, you can assume that the person who got a 720 is in a position where his or her math and verbal skills are better than the person who's a 720, better than the person who's a 700. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's the assumption that you can make. So again, a really easy one. And then you can take GMAT multiple times. So people think, well, if 700 is not your score and you think you can get a 740, then why don't you go and take the test again? And then we'll just look at your best score. So that's a really good measure by which they can look at a candidate. The other way of thinking about it is if you get a really poor GMAT score, and in my mind, I'm saying a 660 or 670, less than 670 to be a poor score because of the demographic that most of us are coming from, right? So we are like the Indian IT/engineering/technical male predominantly, although I'm really glad to see that there's a few females among us, but broadly speaking, that's a big demographic that you have to compete with. So within that, a 670 or a 660 is, particularly if you're applying for the first top 50 schools, is not really a strong score, right? I mean, poor might be a strong word, but it's not really a very flash score. I haven't had too many candidates or too many students who've got a 650 or thereabouts and have gotten admission in the top 20 school with a really stellar application. On the other hand, I have got a lot of students who are about that 720, 730, and they have got admission in the top 20 school, even if their essays were not that flash. So I guess where I'm going with this is if you have a very good GMAT score and you do your college shortlisting properly, a lot of the punch and a lot of the sting is taken away from it, and the pressure is not that high on you to write the essays really well, because chances are you'll get admitted. Having said that, it's not to say that the role of the essays is diminished. It's not that at all. It's just to say or put into perspective that having a strong GMAT score gets you to a point where, yes, your essays are important, but they're probably more of a don't screw it up rather than let's put in our heart and soul into it. Because if you've got less than 650 or 650 and about, really hard getting into the top 20 school. The other factors that you can use when you try and differentiate yourself, so people talk about a lot as well, differentiation is key and you have to be able to differentiate yourself. I totally agree. I think a really, really strong thing that we focus on or I focus on with my students is how to actually differentiate yourself. The two main things that I look at when I'm working with students are, number one, how do you differentiate yourself in a crowd? So how do you stand out from a crowd? And the second thing I look out for is how can you articulate your case with so much clarity that people go, it's a no-brainer that he or she needs an MBA. Those are the two things that my main focus is. Doesn't matter which school you're going to, ultimately you'll need elements or aspects of that preparation anyways. The next thing is ratings of school, really important. Not really. Financial Times is probably the only ratings that I consider to be good. If you look at the methodology behind the ratings, you'll see that Financial Times ratings is like, I think, 3 years lagging. So, the rating that you get right now is basically talking about students who graduated 3 years back and how they're performing in their career over the last 3 years. So it's not that current. At the same time, the only thing I look at when I look at a ranking, and I never look at a ranking as of 1 year, I always look at a ranking as over 3 years, because that gives me a better indication. I mean, if you think about it, schools that have been in operation for 50 years, In 1 year, they're ranked 23, and in 3 years later, they're ranked 70. There's something fundamentally wrong. I cannot understand how this is happening. But this is 3 years back, right? So how a school performs or what happens with the school also depends on the macroeconomic conditions. So as in what's happening within Boston, what's happening within America, what's happening within the world. So they're all different factors, right, that play into account, that come into account. So what I do is I break down the rankings into almost 5 categories. I look at the top 5 schools, and then I go rank 6 to 15. Then I go 16 to about 40. And then I go 41 to 70 and 71 to 100. So if you look at those kind of rankings, obviously the importance of GMAT kind of reduces as you go lower and lower in the ranking. But it reduces in terms of admissions, but it increases in terms of scholarship or opportunity for you to get a scholarship. The highest importance that schools place on GMAT is between rank around 20, 25, all the way to 60, 65, 70. Those are the schools where GMAT is really important. Having said that, it doesn't mean that those are the schools where the GMAT scores are the highest. There's a difference. The GMAT scores could still be quite average in those schools, but they place a lot of weight on GMAT. The last thing that I wanted to cover, because I think we're kind of running out of time now, and I just wanted to make sure that I have some time for questions, is getting a job after an MBA. How easy or hard is it? As I was touching upon, getting a job after an MBA is not really hard, but it is not like what you have experienced so far, right? So when the market's good, I'm pretty sure all of you get calls all the time from recruiters. After an MBA, till you've made your place in the country, which takes about 6 to 8 years, you are not going to get a call by any recruiter for that matter. Most big recruitment companies, so the McKinseys, the BCGs, the A.T. Kearneys, the Bains, these are your traditional management consulting firms. Then you have the accounting firms, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Deloitte, and PwC. These are the top 8 recruiters from any school that you go to. Other than that, there are generally boutique consulting firms. Every city has boutique firms. So these are firms which are focusing on certain areas within consulting. So some of them might do marketing, some of them might do go-to-market strategy, some of them might do resource optimization, whatever that is. So every city will have about 5 to 6 pretty reasonably sized boutique consulting firms. So wherever you go from a consulting perspective, you will have anywhere between 10 to 15 companies that you can apply to, whichever city, whichever MBA you do an MBA from. And entrepreneurship is almost like, it's like an entitlement. Like, for example, if you try and do an entrepreneurship in the US right after an MBA, almost impossible if you do not have an American citizenship, because you won't be able to register a company, you won't be able to get a loan. So people might talk about entrepreneurship all they want, but in reality, well, can you even start up a company in the US? I hadn't thought of that. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Networking, really, really important. There are career events in pretty much every school, but they are not necessarily. So these companies come in and they say, okay, right, this is our recruitment process. This is where you can go in and apply. And then you go in and apply, and that's about it. It's not really on-campus recruitment like what you've seen or heard before. Your grades and your GMAT will continue playing a really important part, particularly if you want to get into consulting. I know we're talking about consulting a lot, and I'll just cover up at the end what other sessions we're planning for, and you'll see that it's not just consulting we deal with, but being the most common sort of pathway after an MBA, it's important to realize, remember that. Work authorization is another thing. I mean, I know a lot of people who went to UK in not the Oxford, Cambridge, London Business School sort of pedigree, but the next level down. And I know people who've been batch toppers there, but unfortunately, they were not able to stay back and work. So you've got to be really careful and understand and think through your work authorization situation before that. So we've covered quite a few different things, and I'm almost at the end of this. Does anyone have any questions about anything I said so far? No? Okay. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was the impact of COVID-19 or coronavirus as we know it. I think it's a massive impact, to be honest. I think there are countries which could potentially hit the brink of recession. And there are industries and organizations that might go bankrupt, like industries going bankrupt as well, as you can see with the travel industry, as you can see with flights and with hotels and what's happening everywhere around the world. But there is a silver lining. I think because of this, a lot of people will not really want to go outside their country and work. That's fine. That gives you a good opportunity to use this as a platform, saying, you know what, I want to take a punt on. I want to take a punt on myself. I think it's a really good. It's a really good opportunity to express and go after my dreams. I think scholarships might be a bit easier to get this year, in spite of the fact that funding will be reduced, just to attract more candidates to come in and do their MBA. The other way you can think about it is, look, you don't really know whether there's going to be a recession or not. But if there is a recession, a lot of us will actually be losing a job. So it might not be bad for us, bad timing for us to actually go and do an MBA. So that when the recession clears off, you're standing in a really, really good position. That's one of the reasons why 2007, 8, 9 had a lot of people do their MBA. Again, sometime around 2014, 15, there was another surge when there wasn't really a recession, but the markets weren't really doing that well. So yeah, I mean, my advice to you at this point would be keep your options open. If you get a good opportunity, go for it. By the time you finish your MBA, that'll be like 2023. So, markets would have bounced back by then, but be very careful and cautious about where you want to do an MBA and what lies in store for you. So do your research on time, reach out to us if you do have any questions. But that's pretty much it from me. As I said, there would be a lot of other sessions. What I would really like to see from you guys is we'll send out like a questionnaire at the end of this session, just to talk about, whether you found the session useful, whether there was something else that I could have touched upon, whether there were questions that you had, any specific questions. We also want to work.
Indradeep, I think Shubhro is basically going to ask some questions. He messaged me just now that he had some questions.
Perfect.
Yeah,
perfect. So but before Shubhro, before we go over there, I just wanted to just quickly wrap this up in terms of what we are expecting or what we would be working on, and then I'll get to your questions in a second. And then if you let us know, we would be working with you all throughout this period. So we want to make sure that the sessions are useful, are customized to what you need. So if you could let us know any specific questions you have, what colleges you're looking for, if there's any specific background. So we would really appreciate if you could fill in the questionnaire we'll send. And then watch out, once every 3 weeks, we will run a session over the next 3 months. We'll let you know what the topics are. But broadly speaking, there'll be about why MBA, why now, what are the funding options, what are the different career options, how do you attend video interviews, how do you improve your LinkedIn profile, everything that you need to know through the process. So that's from me. Shubhro, do you have anything? Do you want to ask in the forum, or do you want to send it to me, or?
Hi, good morning. I can ask it right now, if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Actually, I've been a Cubic student. I studied with Sujata was my mentor last year for 3-4 months. So I scored 720 in my GMAT. And I've got admission invites from 3 colleges: USC Marshall, Cornell 1-year programs, and SR Barcelona.
Yeah.
So I'm basically going for a single 1-year programs. So my question one, I'm actually preferring the USC Marshall course because it's a 1-year STEM course. So that's my preference. Will that be the right decision, considering I want to be in the US? So STEM, I'll get 3 years of, I think I can work there for 3 years. One is that. Second is, will this be the right time to go for a 1-year program, or should I defer it? Last question, with regards to networking and internships. I was just going through Amazon and Walmart portals. Do you think before joining the college, it is better to get in touch with some of the alums and start applying for the internship roles right now, or should I go to the college and then apply for those interns? Because I would prefer to do an internship next year. So these are the 3 questions that I want to know.
Fantastic. Okay, right. Well, I mean, thank you for the question. I think they're all really interesting and good questions, and will help everyone who is attending this session, because this is a real life example. So look, the first thing is, let's work our way back from there, right? So you've got admissions into 3 colleges. There's quite a few different things that you should consider when you pick up, like how do you address multiple offers, right? So I'm assuming that most of these or all of these colleges are ticking at least a couple of your main boxes, right?
Right.
So if you think about the cost, the brand, and and what you can expect after an MBA, a 1-year MBA program is generally a very, very fast-paced MBA program. It will not give you time to network, learn, build up your connections, do any of that. I'm not saying it's not a good program. It's definitely a very good program, but it's like hit the ground running, and it'll expect you to do a lot of reading and prep work throughout the process. So what that basically means is you would have to dedicate your weekends. You would have to work after school hours to do, typically an MBA program, you come into, you finish your program, you come back home and you need to study for 2 hours. For a 1-year program, you need to study for 4 hours. It gets really hard, and it's not for everyone. You need to enjoy the MBA program as well. It's not just about getting a degree and moving on. You won't be investing so much of time for too much of your, too many times. So do you know what I mean? Like,
yes, I understand that. I've calculated all those things when I was, going for a single year program. Yeah.
Perfect. So given that, because I wanted to make sure that you understood this construct before I went into the next part of the question. So given that that's the commonality, your preference is what, Cornell?
USC Marshall, because it's a 1-year STEM program and it's on the West Coast.
So USC Marshall is a really good school. It's a fantastic school. I mean, I have at least maybe 8 to 10 students. It's one of the schools where I have most of my students go. One of the schools in the US. So USC Marshall is a fantastic school. It's a good brand to have on your resume. It's as you said, it's a STEM program. It aligns really well. But what do you want to do after an MBA?
Basically, management consulting. There are 2 options that I have: management consulting or working for any e-com company, basically on their vendor management or business development. Because okay. I am an electrical engineer from Shibpur B College, and then I have got 7 years of pure sales and B2B, B2C, FMCG sales. So like I have a big team. Like I have a budget of $20 million a year, and I'm leading a big team, 35 people right now in my job. So I've got pure 7 years of FMCG sales. No tech side, nothing.
Perfect. Well, that's the reason why you got the admission.
Okay.
Right. That's exactly the reason why you got the admission. But look, I mean, I think USC Marshall is a good option. Everything you've said, they tick the box. It's a good program, and it'll always stand you handy. Barcelona, you said, you've seen what's happening with Europe, right? I mean, why would you want to take a risk going to Europe at this point? Unless it's like an LBS or an Oxford, Cambridge, or even UCL for that matter. I mean, ISADE is good, but given the options you have, I wouldn't pick it up. I wouldn't pick that up. What about scholarship? Are you getting scholarships in anywhere?
Yes, not very high. Like from USC, their program costs around 125K. So they have given me 30K. Cornell again is a 150K course. They have given me 20K. So I think 1 year programs, I don't know. They usually don't, like some of my friends are alums of Cornell. So they also did not get much.
No, and as I said, the higher you are in your ranking, the harder it is for you to get a scholarship.
Okay, yeah. So Esad was giving me 8K euros, but yeah, Esad is out of the question. It's basically Cornell or USC, and I am more towards USC because it's STEM program.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That is absolutely a good choice. Okay, so that's basically your first question. The second one was the right time to go?
Yes.
Is that So I think based on what I've heard from you, I think your main focus is to go out there and work. And if that's hello.
Yes, yeah, I'm there. I'm listening.
Yeah. So your main focus is to go out there and work, but do you want to work and continue living there, or do you want to come back?
Work and live there for a good amount of time.
Okay. So if that's the case, there is no harm for you to go right now. Because all you need is to get a job, because after that, everything else is the same, right? Whether you go now or you go in 5 years' time.
Okay. Right.
So the only thing that you're worried about is after the MBA, can you get a job or not?
Yes. Given the economy it is right now, I'll be graduating next year, July.
Yeah.
July 2021.
But if you think about it, the economy, apart from the coronavirus, was not doing that bad.
Yes. It was booming, very honestly.
The coronavirus.
Yes.
I wouldn't be fussed. I would say absolutely go for it. This is the right time for you to go for it. This is, you've already got the admissions. You've already got the GMAT score. You're already mentally there. Just the coronavirus has not, and in my opinion, will not get to the point where there will be a recession. I honestly don't think there will be a recession. There might be a micro recession, but I mean, I'm working in a corporate role and in a consulting role for a long time. I know exactly what the CEOs are thinking. I know exactly what the board of directors are thinking, particularly within Asia Pacific. And I know that's a reflection of what America is thinking. I don't think this is going to create too many issues for you. On the flip side, if you don't go and you wait for the next year, what happens? You need to go through this process again, right?
No, they're offering me a deferment. Like they're open to that.
No. I mean, in your mind, not the application. I mean, the process, mentally getting ready to go through this.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I were you, I would go for it.
Okay. Right.
If I were you, I would not wait.
Actually, I've been
right. I mean, I would say.
Yeah. Sorry, please.
I would say you have to wait for another at least month and a half to see which way it goes before you take the decision.
Right.
Actually, you can't just pull a plug because.
Yes. I have been in touch with some of the alums. Like the past 10 days, I have talked to nearly 25, alums and friends who have been in the US. So everybody's of the same opinion that I should go for it this year. But somehow because I'm in a bit of a dilemma right now that how it will pan out
But you never know that, right? You never know that. You're seeing that in 3 months' time, the whole world has come down to its knees. In 3 months. So you can never prepare for things like this. If you're good, you will work your way out. And then what happens let's say coronavirus settles down, and then just about next year when you're about to go, something else hits. What happens then? It's a 1-year program. That's why I asked you the question. It's a 1-year program. You're better off getting in there quickly and finishing off the program. The quicker you go, the quicker you finish the program. The quicker you finish the program, the closer you are to achieving your short-term goals.
Right. Noted. Right.
Just go bang, 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 finish it off. It's not a 2-year. That's why I was asking those questions.
Right. Sure.
And then about internship and about speaking with people, I would connect with the alumni now.
Right.
I would not talk about anything in particular, about job, about networking. That's not. So what I'll do, Shubhro, is the next session that we run, I'll talk about how do you do networking. So that'll be for people like yourself who are actually looking to go over there. What does networking mean? So I'll give you an example. I've been in Australia for 10 years now. In the last 7 years, I have left 6 companies. Each of the companies that I've got, except for the last 2, so the first 4 companies, they've all been through networking. So I'll tell you exactly how to do networking and what does that mean and how much effort you've got to put in. Networking is not about sending LinkedIn messages. People get really pissed off if you do that. So my recommendation or suggestion is just connect to them and don't tell them anything. When you're there, go and meet them for a coffee. And in my next session, I'll tell you exactly how to plan it out. I've done that many, many times.
Sure. Really looking forward to that session. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, this is, as I said, this is a lot more top level, right? This is a lot more high level. From each of the next sessions, we're going to get really, really deep into various aspects of your MBA application.
Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Anyone else has any question? No worries, Shubhro. Anyone else has any questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. I know we've gone beyond our scheduled time, but that's also because we started a little later. The recording of the sessions here, Shujoy would work his magic and try and create something out of this. We will be sending you a questionnaire after this session as to what was helpful, what was not. And at the same time, please feel free to get in touch with either of us, letting us know what your specific questions are. What is it that you're thinking with, just like Shubhro did, these kind of real life examples. It doesn't have to be, well, I've got an offer. It could just be that I don't even know whether I should do an MBA or should I do a master's of marketing or master's of finance. Whatever that is, we're more than happy to help. And we'll send you some specific questions about where you are in your application process. Please feel free to spread the word about these kind of sessions that will be happening once every 3 weeks. We'll be sending you the link just like we did for this one. And if there's nothing else, Shujoy, do you want to close the session?
Yeah, I think so.